It's time for Reason.
Let's remember that Kansas hands out more provisional ballots than really any other state in the nation. And that's a good thing, because we want you to have the opportunity, if there's the slightest chance of your vote to be able to be counted. We're not sure at the time whether you can actually vote or not. Here's a provisional ballot. We'll look at it on the back end, and then we'll count it if we can. If not, then we'll have to toss it away. That's how our system is set up in Kansas.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Then I'll get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again.
Today is going to be one of those days just as exciting as after Election Day. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, well, first off, we have more elections to cover from around the country. We also have our Republican candidate for the governorship 2018 right here in the state of Kansas. I know you're excited. I know you're ready to go. Welcome into the Voice of Reason, broadcasting live out of the heart of the nation here in Wichita, Kansas on the Big Talker, 1480 on the AM side, 102.5 on the FM side, KQAM, simulcasting on TV as well, KGPT TV, channel 2610. Welcome aboard. It's great to have you along this morning. A lot to get to today. Boy, oh boy. Yesterday, we had talked on the show as some of the numbers were beginning to trickle in from different counties, the official provisional, the different mail-in ballots in the state, and we were concerned to see what was going to happen. We weren't quite sure. And then we saw Sedgwick County report yesterday afternoon, about middle of the day. It finally reported, and Kris Kobach was up by over 300 votes over Jeff Colyer. And I was thinking, and I was looking over the number, and I came out with a post on social media, and I said, you know, in case anything crazy happens, unless something crazy happens in Johnson County, then I said Kris Kobach's gonna win this, I think. I didn't know. But I made a post, and I said, you know what, I'm going to call it for Kris Kobach. Just for the sake of statistically, if you actually follow the numbers, it's not some radical bias thing here. It's just looking and analyzing, as many like to do, that unless there's a crazy wild ratio that's off compared to what we saw from Tuesday night last week in Johnson County, then even if Jeff Colyer wins Johnson County, it wouldn't have been enough to be able to come back and beat Kris Kobach, plus still the same counties that are still trickling in, and there's still a lot more that have anywhere from 5 to 30 different provisional ballots, but not enough to really do anything, and the other counties predominantly went towards Kris Kobach. So unless Johnson County was crazy wild out there, then Kris Kobach was going to win this, and I made the post, and then Johnson County came in. And at the end of it, when Johnson County was all finalized, Kris Kobach was still up by almost 400 votes. And it was called. And then we see a press conference from Kris Kobach. And then later last night, I don't know if you saw it or not, saw the press conference from Jeff Colyer. And this ended up happening, finalizing the deal.
Tracy and I will not challenge this in court, nor will we be asking for a recount. Right here and now, we will endorse the winner, Kris Kobach and Wink Hartman.
There it is. So that was Governor Jeff Colyer last night with the official concession of the race and endorsement of Kris Kobach and Wink Hartman for governorship 2018. The Republican candidate has been set. We only wasted 1 week, and ladies and gentlemen, now it is time. Now it is time for us to stand together, for us to work together, and for us to be able to stop a Democrat from getting the governorship this year. This is the time. Now, again, I would have been completely content either way. If we would have had Kris Kobach or Jeff Colyer, I would have been fine. We would have moved forward, because now is the time for the unity of the Republican Party, and it's exactly what Governor Colyer had talked about last night.
When I first became governor a few short months ago, I promised the citizens of Kansas that we would listen, we would serve, and we would lead. We will build solutions for Kansans. We're building solutions for our neighbors. I've just had a conversation with the Secretary of State, and I congratulated him on his success, and I repeated my determination to keep this seat in Republican hands. This election is probably the closest in America, but the numbers are just not there unless we would go to extraordinary measures. But Kansas is too important. The people of Kansas are too important. Our children are too important.
There it is. Governor Jeff Colyer last night. It's too important. We need to maintain a Republican seat, and that's exactly what we did last night. 316-721-8255. The final vote after Johnson County. Now, again, this is not going to be the official vote, but it's definitely going to be enough for us to carry it on. And when the other counties report in, then we can get an official number probably by next Monday. But the official vote after Johnson County, Kris Kobach ends up leading Jeff Colyer 345 votes. Just imagine. With more than 315,000 people that voted, it came down to 345 votes. That is the closest, as Governor Colyer said, that is probably one of the closest races that we've seen in the country for a statewide race like this. A major race, a hard-fought race. Both candidates were great. We appreciate their sportsmanship very much so, and the other ones as well with Jim Barnett and with Ken Seltzer and even the high school students, great. That one could have definitely swayed the election a little bit more if the high school students were not in there and we consolidated it just a little bit more. That may have actually broken out for a Tuesday night victory last week. Nonetheless, it happened. That's the way it is. Let's move forward now, and let's focus on that Democrat. We have a progressive liberal Democrat of Laura Kelly that is running. We have an independent that is a left-leaning progressive independent with Greg Orman, and then we have a Republican candidate that is now Kris Kobach and Wayne Cartman. And it's time for us to rally. What do you say? 316-721-8255. I want to get your thoughts on this. Will we be supporting the Republican candidate? Will we be uniting? I know there's a lot of individuals that didn't like Jeff Colyer. I know there's a lot of individuals that don't like Kris Kobach. And is that going to sway one way or another to say, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to support the Republican candidate? Or will we unite and will we be able to ride this through to defeat the Democrats, to defeat the independent, and be able to keep and maintain a Republican governorship for 2 terms, or 3 terms technically if you want to do the 2 terms from Brownback and Colyer, but for more than 8 years at a time, when predominantly and historically in Kansas it sways to the other side. Is this our year to really change that dynamic? And how much effect do you think that Donald Trump and the Trumpism, Republicanism actually has in the current political system today? Right now, especially with Kris Kobach being a pro-Trump individual, is that going to help him go into the midterm elections? 316-721-8255. Lots to get to today. We have Molly Gill. She's with Policy for Families Against Mandatory Minimums coming up at 7 o'clock. She's going to be talking to us. If you remember last week, President Trump sat down with some inner city pastors, and they were singing his praises about things that he was wanting to do, wanting to help the families get back together, wanting to do prison reform, wanting to help inner cities, wanting to help African-American communities. And the criticism of those pastors has been absolutely horrendous. They have been vicious. They have been brutal. They have been racist. It's been absolutely absurd. So we're going to talk with her about her take on that whole situation. Plus, of course, Jim Howell coming up at 7:30 today, Sedgwick County Commission, getting ready for that meeting. Kris Kobach, by the way, will be joining us on the show tomorrow. Not sure a time yet, but I already talked to the campaign. They will be talking to us tomorrow morning right here on The Voice of Reason. Looking forward to chatting with him tomorrow. But let's get your phone calls right now, shall we? Line number 1. Good morning. What's your name?
My name is Eddie.
Good morning, Eddie. How are you, sir?
Hey, it's a beautiful morning, isn't it?
That it is. It's a great morning. Now we finally have a candidate, and we can move forward and actually focus on a general election. I'm a little excited about that.
Absolutely. I'm just glad that Governor Colyer decided to, just call it quits. He's a good man, and he could carry this on forever. But hey, we have a beautiful candidate, and we're just going to go straight ahead, and we're going to win, Andy. Don't even worry about this damn Democrat thing every 8 years. Sounds like some old man.
Well, it is a little concerning. I mean, it's happened in Kansas for like the last, 80, 90 years or something. I mean, it's been ridiculous how long this has gone on every 8 years that we switch parties, Republican, Democrats. But I really feel confident about it this year.
Oh, I know that Kobach's going to win. I have a lot of confidence. First of all, I really like the man, and I really like the lieutenant governor. And we're just going to go straight ahead. I mean, this lady, I have a hard time remembering names, and I can't even remember this lady's name. I see her on TV, and it looked like she's been retired for about 50 years. But anyway, I just think it's a beautiful morning, And I think that Kobach is going to go straight ahead, and I think he's going to win. Positive attitude. The man is going to win.
Positive attitude. I like that. Getting the good vibes out into the universe already this morning. I like that.
Absolutely. I mean, don't even mention it. That damn 8-year thing. To hell with it. You know, if I live my life looking at an almanac book, is this supposed to happen? This or this supposed to happen? I mean, I say no. It's going to happen. Things are going to happen because I want them to. Nothing controls me. No damn book or all of my own, whatever the hell that word is. Nothing's going to control me. I'm going to go straight ahead, and we are going to win. Period.
I love it. I love it. That's what it's all about right there, Eddie. I appreciate that very much. No, you're absolutely right. We're going to win. We're going to continue this momentum. We had great, massive turnout for Republicans in the primary election. We had very minimal turnout for Democrats in the election, meaning they're already not that excited. They don't know what direction to go. I do see them being torn between voting for either Greg Orman or for Laura Kelly. I think that they are going to be divided in that vote, and Republicans will unite. I hope, I plead that many, even if you don't necessarily care for Kris Kobach, that you understand that it's party over person in the general election. We support the Republican candidate, and that's the way that we win. That's the way we move forward, because now it's about the party being able to maintain control. It's about the idealism of conservatism and republicanism beating liberal progressivism in the state. It's not about an individual at this point any longer. It's now about the party and what we can do with this party. 316-721-8255. Line number 2. Good morning. What's your name?
This is Jim.
Good morning, Jim. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm just happy as all get out.
There you go.
I was going to say a nasty word there, but no.
This is a family show, yes.
I met Kris Kobach back in 2007 at a what they called an empty holster protest, or up at Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
He was there. There were lots of professors and other people carrying empty holsters because at that time it was not legal to carry on the campus or anything.
Sure.
And he was on our side then, and I've been on his side ever since. I was just very happy. Now, if the election had turned out a little bit different, I would have been happy to vote for Governor Colyer.
Sure.
In November. The NRA endorsed Governor Colyer because he is a good man and he's the incumbent in the office.
Sure.
However, the Kansas State Rifle Association endorsed Kris Kobach. I think maybe because the former Kansas State Rifle Association president, Pat Stoneking, was at that same empty holster protest up at Manhattan. So he's a good man. He's on our side. I think every bit of the anti-Kobach stuff I've seen has to do with his position on voter identification and making sure that only American citizens vote in the elections. Which
predominantly Republicans are going to support anyway, so I don't think that's going to be a factor going into a general election.
Yeah, I don't think so. And, we don't want to have, the communists from Russia voting, and I don't want to have the Mexicans voting. The Mexicans can come up to the United States and claim to be citizens up here, and they can still vote in the Mexican elections. But you can't go to Mexico and vote for the Mexicans. They're much more strict than we are.
Oh, sure. I mean, they're strict on their immigration policy. They're strict on their foreign policy. They're strict on their trade. They're strict on their voter ID and their voting. Now, again, their voting is very corrupt in the first place because they have predominantly drug lords that actually control their government, and their government and their law enforcement's actually very corrupt in that sense, too. So, but, I mean, come on, it's going to be all saved by their new socialist president, so good for them in that sense. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of differences between the two, and not even just Mexico, but all over Central America with individuals coming up here. And again, if you're not a citizen, even if you're just a resident, being a resident does not allow you to actually vote in American elections. California and some of the other states are trying to allow illegal immigrants to be able to vote now. And maybe if we have a governor that's been able to tighten up the voter ID laws in the state of Kansas, that can be an example, as we've been in many other cases and issues, that we can actually be that example for the rest of the country on what kind of platform that we can stand on.
Yeah, being an American is a valuable and an important thing. And if we give it away, it's not worth anything.
Exactly. I love it. Jim, I appreciate it very much. We got to take a break here, but great news today is we finally have our candidate. We're moving in the right direction. We are advancing conservatism on a daily basis. That's what we do here on The Voice of Reason, and we will have a Republican governor come 2019 right here in the state of Kansas, and it's largely because of you right here, the voter, the constituent, making it happen here on The Voice of Reason.
The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
27 minutes past the hour. Welcome into The Voice of Reason right here on a Wednesday. It is a hashtag freedom-loving Wednesday, as it is every single week. We're really excited about being able to focus on general election time, baby. Because I'm a dork like that. 316-721-8255. You know, this whole process about the primaries really brings up some interesting conversations that we need to have. And as we had a conversation yesterday with Kelly Arnold, state Republican chair, that brings up a really interesting conversation that we need to be having, I think, for future elections. We need to address what issues and what actions to take with the unaffiliated voters going into a primary. We really have to have this conversation, and I want to get into it a little bit today because there was the potential, and even Jeff Colyer mentioned it yesterday, that there was the potential for legal issues to be taking this to court.
I've just had a conversation with the Secretary of State, and I congratulated him on his success, and I repeated my determination to keep this seat in Republican hands. This election is probably the closest in America, but the numbers are just not there unless we would go to extraordinary measures. But Kansas is too important. The people of Kansas are too important. Our children are too important.
And he could have taken this to a legal suit in order to talk about the unaffiliated voters. And there was an issue that arose. We'll talk about that because there was some misinformation on Election Day. There were provisional ballots that were up in the air about whether they should be counted or not. And I think we really need to have this conversation so this way it does not happen in the future. Very, very rarely. And the reason we haven't addressed this is because obviously very rarely do we have an election come down to this few votes difference between the candidates. I don't remember the last time that we've had a governor's race, if ever, that came down within hundreds of ballots when over 100 and some odd thousand people actually voted, or 300 some odd people actually vote. This is insane how close this actually came down to. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show today. I do want to talk about the unaffiliated, what the law is right now, what should have happened, what did happen, and how we move forward from here on out, because that way we can make sure we don't have to worry about this in the future in any way, shape, or form. The ideal situation, if you're unaffiliated, sorry, you're not going to partake in the party's primary. That's just it. End of story. You cannot say that you're independent, that you hate the party, but then you decide to go to the party to vote in their primary election to help choose their candidate. To me, that's the best way. That's what needs to happen. What's actually happening right now, we'll discuss a little bit later. Your thoughts when we come back. This is The Voice of Reason on a freedom-loving Wednesday. Let's make it happen today. What do you say?
It's time for Reason.
Now, if a Republican all of a sudden, worried about an election, comes around and starts wavering on his principles and says, okay, I'm going to give that amnesty, would that soften your heart to the Republican? Or would you say, yeah, that's nice, great, thanks. That's one less thing that we actually have to address when we're in power, and I'm still going to vote for the Democrat.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Hey, welcome into The Voice of Reason. Good Wednesday morning to you. It's great to have you along today on a hashtag Freedom and Loving Wednesday. Lots to get to today, lots to talk about between the election here in Kansas, which, of course, as you know, Kris Kobach, now the Republican candidate for the governorship 2018. Then we have the Democrats, of course, doing their thing. We can focus on the general election. We had more primary races throughout the country last night, and we've talked about this before. It's no shocker. Democrats, let me just tell you right now, big sounder, breaking news right here, right? Everybody, breaking news. Just so you know, breaking news, Democrats do not care about the individual. I know, that's a crazy, wild shocker for everybody, right? Progressives, liberals, and Democrats do not care about the individual. They care about the group. They care about the collective. There's no shock to that. Everybody knows that because they don't care about the actual character of an individual. According to the New York Times last night, as with many of the states, 4 states that went to the polls yesterday, Democrats delivered groundbreaking primary victories for a transgender woman in Vermont, a Muslim woman in Minnesota, and an African-American woman in Connecticut, while voters in Wisconsin nominated a top state education official to challenge Governor Scott Walker, one of the most vulnerable, high-profile Republicans of the midterm cycle. There it is. Who cares about the individual? Who cares that it's an individual that has a record, a voting record, or a platform, or the stance? Who cares about that? They were groundbreaking. They were absolutely successful last night as Democrats because they won when it came to a transgender woman winning the nomination in Vermont, a Muslim woman in Minnesota winning the nomination, an African-American woman winning the nomination in Connecticut. It doesn't matter what their platforms are. It doesn't matter what they stand on. It doesn't matter who their opponents were. It doesn't matter what they've said. It doesn't matter about their voting record. It doesn't matter about any of that. Look at this. They are now saying, here's the groupthink mentality. Here's the collective. It doesn't matter. We will break ground. We will be able to create history if we get a transgender woman nominated and elected in Vermont. Doesn't matter what position. Doesn't matter the platform. Doesn't matter the record. Doesn't matter the history. Not a transgender woman. If she wins, or he wins, or whatever they were before and whatever they decided to try and become later, doesn't matter. I don't know with the transgender woman if it was originally a woman or a new woman now from over the head. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what they do. If they get elected in Vermont, right there, history in the making. Done. We can check it off. That class is fulfilled. That portion is represented. That group is represented now because it's all about the group. It's all about the group. Progressive Christine Hallquist becomes first transgender gubernatorial nominee for a major party. Christine Hallquist, who is running as a progressive Democrat in Vermont, made history on Tuesday as she became the first transgender gubernatorial candidate nominated for a major political party, advancing a progressive platform focused on economic and social justice, including a $15 an hour minimum wage, environmentally sustainable rural development, and expanding access to internet services. Hallquist edged out challengers in a crowded primary. She led the field with 39% of the vote, according to the unofficial results that happened last night. Quote, I am so proud of the face to be the face of the Democrats tonight. Now we know part of the platform, okay, a liberal progressive. We could have guessed that in the first place, but $15 an hour minimum wage, environmental sustainability, which means she's going to increase the EPA at a statewide level. They're going to put in more taxes. They're going to put in more regulation. That's what they want to do. Now, Vermont's a little odd in themselves as well because Vermont is where, of course, Bernie Sanders is, so she will fit in relatively well. Bernie Sanders, as you know, coming out and saying that he will rerun again as an independent because he's all about the independent thing, and he's done that for the last 30 years. Not a big shocker there. Don't know why that's big news. But Vermont's kind of unique on its own there. Could she potentially win the governorship? Possibly. Very possibly. If they elect Bernie Sanders, then they potentially could elect this individual as, again, an individual. But, of course, all the progressives are going to be excited. We are groundbreaking. We are trend-setting because we elected the first transgender governor in the country. Now, in the world of divisiveness, it is a little bit interesting that this individual, this Christine, got the nomination over everybody else in the Democrat Party. Again, not as exciting as the fact that it's the state where Bernie Sanders has come from predominantly as well. But in the world to where we're fighting right now conservative traditionalism and left-wing progressivism, do you think that they actually have a chance to do this at a statewide level? I don't know. I don't know much about Vermont. I don't know much about the effects of or the influence of the Republican Party in Vermont, but this is all they care about. And I would say, if it was anywhere else in the country, I would say that it would be just a little too divisive. Not necessarily just being the transgender part, but the $15 an hour minimum wage. About the environmental sustainability, which everybody's talking about, got to save the earth. And we got to do it through the government for whatever reason. Sustainable rural development, expanding access to internet services because they're about thinking the internet's actually some kind of public service that everybody just should get instead of actually private companies that offer you a service and you can purchase that service if you're able to do so. And that's usually the way the internet's actually been done. Now they want to make it a public service and a public utility, and they want to make it to where the government gets to regulate and control this. Not sure how that's going to actually create more accessibility to the internet, but that's another discussion for another time. The point is that we've gone to the fringes now. We've gone as far as we could possibly go. I don't know, as political spectrums evolve, and I've always been one that enjoys the political spectrums on where they kind of go and the pendulum that swings back and forth, usually in elections, and where everybody stands and at what point is certain political ideals accepted socially and not accepted socially. I mean, back in the day, during the foundings of this nation, during the traditionalism of this nation, if we would have had an issue like this, they would have laughed at them because it was completely nuts. That right now, where the Republican Party is, would have been the left side of the aisle because conservatism was very traditional. Conservatism was very religious. Conservatism was very much saying, wait a second, we're actually allowing these many taxes to be imposed on us on a daily basis. We're actually allowing the government to have a discussion about what type of accessories you can have on your firearm and how you actually regulate them and how you actually register them. You actually are allowing this. Back in the day, that wouldn't have been accepted in any way, shape, or form, and we would have seen another civil war. We would have seen a revolution. We would have seen a rising up, and I'm not advocating for that in any way, shape, or form. I'm saying historically, that's what has led to the revolution in the past. That's what was leading to the Civil War in the past. Because we want freedom in the United States. And we've evolved and we've grown and we've slowly gone more towards this progressive mentality. We've gone slowly more towards this bigger government mentality. Nowadays, we don't even recognize the fact that the states themselves have more power or should have more power than the federal government. Constitutionally. We're not talking about the Articles of Confederation here. We are talking about the Constitution of the United States, to where other than the military, other than national security, other than foreign policy and regulating interstate commerce, the federal government should not have any say in anything outside of that, period. No safety nets, no government programs, no environmental protection agency, no Department of Energy, no Department of whatever, no Department of nothing, no Department of Education. Imagine a world where we actually go to school and it was based on state curriculums and it was based on a little tiny building where all the kids went and actually got their education. Imagine what happened back in the day before the government in, the 60s? Started a Department of Education. And nowadays, we can't possibly live without that. There's no way. We would be such unintelligent Neanderthals if we didn't have a Department of Education, right? Even though we have a really small, really low voter turnout too, but a really low graduation rate, really low test scores, because now we're trying to set these national curricula. It's really funny to watch the trend here while we say there's no way we could ever survive without a Department of Education, because that's supposed to be at the state level. As much as I poke fun of California with their Environmental Protection Agency, if that's what they want to do as a state, all the power to them, because that's supposed to be at the state level, not the federal level. If Vermont wants to go down this road and elect this transgender woman and have the $15 an hour minimum wage and try and actually have the environmental sustainability at the statewide level, you know what? Then I may not like that. Thank God I don't live in the state of Vermont, because that's their prerogative. If they choose to do that, they can do that. But look how far we've come. Look how far we've come as a nation. Look how far we've come at accepting different ideals, to the point to where members of Antifa or whatever the hell you want to call them, the nuts that are bullying people in the streets, that are silencing any opposition because if you disagree with them, then you are a bigot, you are a racist, you are a whatever else they want to call you, and therefore they are justified in harassing you and beating you up, and we tolerate it and we accept it in society. Because they say when we voice our opinion, it's hate speech and needs to be silenced. When they speak, they had the justification to be violent and to silence us. And we tolerate it and we accept it. They browbeat us and we continue to allow it. Because the pendulum has swung so far to the left, historically in the United States and in U.S. politics, so far to the left that we've now accepted radical views as a nation. People that want to dismantle the Constitution completely, that openly advocate for democratic socialism, tyranny, fascism, communism. Yes, it's all on that side of the aisle. We've openly allowed them to try and dismantle the U.S. and advocate for that, and we're still tolerating it. 100 years ago, that would have been called treason because you're going against it. You can believe whatever you want to, but to openly advocate for it, that is called treason because we live in a constitutional republic. We live under the Constitution of the United States, and that's not going to change. And if you don't like that, then oh well. And if the state, which is why the state has more power than the federal government, if the state decides to secede because they don't like that, then you know what? All the progressives can rally around that state. They can secede, go out and start their own nation and see how well that works for them. Because that was the prerogative of how we were supposed to actually work. That's how we were supposed to operate. That's how this country was supposed to actually form under a society of federalism. 316-721-8255. It's kind of interesting to watch the trends of how far we've gone. And now individuals are openly advocating for socialism, $15 an hour minimum wage, and insane environmental protections. And we just had a candidate that won that mindset as the candidate for the Democrats in the state of Vermont last night. Let's go to the phones, get your thoughts on all this and more. Line at number one. Good morning. What's your name?
This is Pete.
Good morning, Pete. How are you, sir?
I'm good, sir. How are you today?
Hey, we're living the dream. This is a good day today.
Absolutely. Well, you know, brother, I wanted to set you straight on something about the Department of Education.
Okay.
That was actually created under Jimmy Carter in 1979.
No, that's right. In the 70s. It wasn't even the 60s. But remember,
right.
We had Neanderthals and we had people that had no idea how to read, how to talk, how to communicate before that because the government should be providing education, not the private industry or not the states or whatever, that the government needs to be regulating that.
Well, you know, let me put it to you this way. What you say is probably, you know, the dogma of the left, but hey, we put man on the moon before there was a Department of Education. And we did it before before all the integrated circuits, back when they had to hardwire the programming for the Apollo guidance computer. It was literally stitched into the computer system. So somebody had to figure that out before there was a Department of Education.
Sure.
And so, and then you look at, you know, the caliber of, you know, I don't want to besmirch the students that are coming out, but they're just products of the system. And if you look at the product of the system today, it ain't such a good product. It
Sure.
ain't the kids' fault per se, because it's just like a computer, garbage in, garbage out.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, we have, and that's why, again, I mean, there's many factors to it. Not only the Department of Education with the garbage in, garbage out, but then we have the lack of family involvement with the family going home and teaching them what's proper when it comes to their education and what knowledge they need to know on the home front, helping them with their homework, helping them understand it, understanding it themselves, and being involved in the education of their children. We're seeing that on the downside as well, in between the home front, the foundation, really, of the education falling apart from the home front, and then we have the garbage in, garbage out from the education system itself, then, and again, this is not an attack on the teachers. This is not an attack on local schools. This is an attack on the system that said, yes, you know what, let's have a national curriculum. Let's have Common Core education. Let's tell the local districts exactly what they need to teach, and the rest of it at the local front, for that front of it at least, is out of their hands.
Well, and it all goes back to the point you were trying to make, is in the Constitution, it's very clear. Any powers not specifically enumerated to the federal government all of the states.
Right.
And we need to get back to what the Constitution actually says.
Exactly. Look, we pass bills now that are thousands of pages long, amendments or bills or legislation or taxes or different budgets or whatever, tens of thousands of pages. We have no idea what they say. We vote on them without actually reading them. The Constitution's what, 20 pages long?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, if it's not specifically, directly saying this branch, you're allowed to do this. Hey, this branch, you're allowed to do this. The purpose of the government is to do this. Everything else goes back to the states. We don't follow that anymore. And because of that, we've forgotten the fact that states have more power than the federal government, because if you want an environmental protection agency, if you want a Department of Education, if you want a Department of Labor or whatever other department that you want, that's supposed to be at the statewide level, not at the federal level. But in today's times, that is a very, very radical view to have.
Well, the founding fathers were considered to be radicals themselves, even in their own time.
Well, that is very true. That is very true.
So,
Pete, I appreciate it very much, my friend. Always appreciate that. You're absolutely right. This is what we have to get back to. But I just bring this up as we talk about the elections, as we cover what candidates around the country are actually being representing the parties, what the parties are standing for, what the parties are tolerating, where the parties are going, and what direction we're actually going, that we're seeing more and more radicalism within progressive movements because they're becoming more emboldened, they're becoming stronger, they feel they're getting away with more, and even though they're going on the fringe, I don't think it's going to work. To sum all this up, I think it's going to backfire on the Democrats. I think the Bernie Sandersite socialist movement will backfire. I believe that having a candidate, regardless of whether she's transgender or not in Vermont, I don't really care. Doesn't matter to me one way, shape, or form. Do I believe in that? No, but you know what? All the power to her. Or whatever. But the fact that they stand on the $15 an hour minimum wage, environmental sustainability, thinking the internet is a public utility so they can regulate it through the government, these are radical views. And they may feel really emboldened right now, but that's a fringe part of the base of the Democratic Party. It's not going to work for them in general elections. Maybe in Vermont because Bernie Sanders is there and has a stronghold and has believed in that stuff for a really long time. But outside of Vermont, it's not going to happen. Outside of Vermont, it's going to be more dangerous to the Democrats because they thought that they were crumbling before when Barack Obama didn't reinvest in the statewide parties, didn't allow the Democrats to get access to money and to support and to grassroots campaigning at the local levels under Barack Obama because he failed miserably, and even the Democrats admit that one, that they thought that was the worst case scenario they had. Wait until they go to the fringe. Wait until they go to the radical views and watch what happens. The country will not accept that. We're not ready for that. I don't think we'll ever be ready for that. And the more they try it, the harder they will fall. And that's really what's going to be happening. 8 minutes to the top, 6 minutes. If I can get my numbers right. 6 minutes to the top of the hour. We'll take a break, wrap up hour number 1. This is The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Wrapping up hour number 1 already. It goes by way too fast. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us this morning. We got a lot to get to today. We have election coverage from around the nation. We have our Republican candidate here for the governorship here in the state of Kansas. We'll talk about that and more. But when we come back, we'll shift gears from the election for just a minute. We'll be talking with Molly Gill about, as you remember, on the national front, as we talk about inner cities, we talk about the African-American community, and Donald Trump, of course, being a racist and all the conservatives being racist, what we're doing for those communities and the attacks that the inner city pastors received by joining President Trump at the White House last week. We'll talk about some of that and more. Plus, Jim Howell at the bottom of the hour, next hour, talking about the elections, talking about the Sedgwick County Commission meeting today. I don't know if we're going to have time for all this. Take some energy drinks because we got a lot to get to today. This is The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
It's time for Reason.
Let's remember that Kansas hands out more provisional ballots than really any other state in the nation. And that's a good thing because we want you to have the opportunity, if there's the slightest chance of your vote to be able to be counted. We're not sure at the time whether you can actually vote or not. Here's a provisional ballot. We'll look at it on the back end, and then we'll count it if we can. If not, then we'll have to toss it away. That's how our system is set up in Kansas.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Then I'll get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Welcome into the Voice of Reason, hour number 2 of the Voice of Reason, broadcasting live out of the heart of the nation here in Wichita, Kansas. On the Big Talker, 1480 on the AM side, 102.5 on the FM side, KQAM, simulcasting on TV, KGPT TV, channel 2610. Good morning, welcome aboard. It's great to have you along today on a hashtag Freedom Loving Wednesday. So this happened last night.
Tracy and I will not challenge this in court, nor will we be asking for a recount. Right here and now, we will endorse the winner, Kris Kobach and Wink Hartman.
There it is. That was Governor Jeff Colyer last night after the primary count came in from Johnson County from the provisional ballots and from the mail-in ballots, and Governor Colyer stepping away and endorsing officially Kris Kobach and Wink Hartman. We now officially have a Republican candidate going into 2018 for this race. It is now set to Kris Kobach against Laura Kelly, the Democrat, and against Greg Orman, the Independent. Should be kind of a fun race. We'll talk about some more of that in a little bit, but I do want to shift gears just for a minute because, as you know, Kris Kobach was one of the very first candidates to endorse Donald Trump in the election in 2016. Here in the state of Kansas, he was the very first elected official for the state of Kansas to support Donald Trump, and because of that, he's been the Trumper. Trump endorsed Kris Kobach for the governor's race here, and because of that, I mean, as you know, we wear a Make America Great Again hat. We support President Donald Trump. We support conservatism. We're not part of the Antifa group or the left-wing progressive fringe, and because of that, the left-wing progressive fringe ends up calling us the racists and the bigots and the white nationalists and the white supremacists and all these other or derogatory terms just because they got nothing better to attack us with. They can't attack us on policy because the policies are working. Tax cuts and, 4.1 GDP growth and lowest unemployment rate for a really long time, lowest unemployment rate for African-American communities, for women, for different groups. And I don't like to break down groups because we look at character of individuals, again, not the group thing, collective mentality. But if they want to break it down, then look at what's happening across the nation. Now we just need to implement that mentality in Kansas, where we were one of the 2 or 3 states in the entire nation that actually had negative GDP growth last year. Nonetheless, we are considered the racist, the terrible, horrible individuals, and that was shown perfectly, what was it, a week or so ago, when many pastors from inner city areas ended up going to the White House, sitting down with President Trump, talking about reuniting families, talking about reform in the justice system, talking about different ways to help communities that need help. I don't remember President Barack Obama doing that. Maybe he did. I don't know. Doesn't matter. I don't remember progressives thanking President Trump for at least sitting down and talking. And if you remember the comments from many of these pastors, they were very positive. They love the fact this is being addressed. They love the fact that President Trump invited them there. Nothing racial or nothing derogatory was mentioned in the meeting with President Trump, meaning that they actually appreciated the conversation to be having of what needed to be had for inner city areas. But of course, all the pastors now are now racist or are derogatory. They're terrible human beings for even associating themselves with President Trump. And to talk to us about that and a heck of a lot more, she's Vice President of Policy for Families Against Mandatory Minimums. We have Molly Gill on the line with us here. Molly, good morning to you. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show.
I appreciate it very much. Talk about the response. I got to watch the video, the live feed when that was happening a week or so ago with President Trump for these pastors. And I knew right off the bat, with the comments that these individuals were making, that the media would attack them terribly, that the progressive, the left side of the aisle would go after these pastors horrendously. What's happened after that meeting when we're talking about reform, justice reform, when we're talking about families, talking about investing in inner city areas, that apparently is a racist thing now, is it not?
Well, I don't think you can call it a racist. Criminal justice reform, sometimes these conversations around criminal justice reform and who comes to the table surprises people because there is a lot of agreement on the right and on the left on this issue. Progressives and conservatives agree that our justice system has put too many people in prison for too long and that is harmful to families and to communities, that we need to be doing a better job of rehabilitating people when they're in prison so that they come home and they don't go back to prison. There is wide bipartisan agreement on all of those issues. There was in the Obama administration, and Obama supported criminal justice reform. There is in the Trump administration, and President Trump is supporting criminal justice reform. And he is doing what presidents do when they're working on a signature piece of legislation like this. He's bringing in people who care about the issue to hear from them. And so I think for some people who aren't aware of this long sort of kumbaya feeling around criminal justice, this meeting probably did take them by surprise, and they probably did sort of have that, knee-jerk reaction of what are all these black pastors doing meeting with President Trump?
Sure. It is ironic as you mentioned. I mean, they are taken aback. Now, here in Kansas, I think that we've done a phenomenal job as we've worked towards prison reform and criminal justice reform. Governor Sam Brownback, our prior governor, has done a phenomenal job. I've got to tour some of our state prisons and our state units, and to see the programs that they have and the different incentive programs and the different religious programs and the low turnaround rate of people being reincarcerated again is extremely low in Kansas. Are those some of the ideas that we're discussing that are being discussed on a national level on things that we can do to reform some of these programs?
Absolutely. Things like, what a concept, incentivizing prisoners to do programs. We'd all love it if they were saints and they would just do their own rehabilitation on their own initiative. But we all, if you know anything about economics, that's not really how humans work. Humans like incentives. They like to have a carrot as well as a stick. And this bill is creating some carrots for prisoners to do programming, to invest in their own reentry into the community, to get into those faith-based and programs. And, Kansas and lots of other states do systems like this. The federal government is actually kind of behind the times on that concept. So the bill that's moving through Congress right now, the First Step Act, would create an incentive system for prisoners to complete programming. It would fund more programming. My organization, FAMM, talks to about 40 to 50,000, federal prisoners every day. And the main thing we hear from them actually is that they're bored. Not that prison makes them worse, but that prison makes them bored. And we think, let's use that time, let's make that time valuable for them and for their families and for their futures.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, one thing that I noticed when I did do some of the tours through the state prisons here was the focus on structure. And they had mentioned to me when I was there was that these individuals, a lot of them had no structure in life, that life moves so fast. They didn't have the structure. They didn't have their parents guiding them. They didn't have some type of structure on to go to work throughout the day, the daily routine, the daily grind, to have that structure, to have that repetitive muscle memory, so to speak. And that's really what was really helping them in these. They had opportunities for jobs. There were businesses that were freelancing some of the labor into the prison there so they could actually have a job. They could make a small amount of money, be able to pay off some of their debts, be able to save up for when they get out. They don't run back into debt and panic again. Is that kind of things that we're talking about in this bill?
Absolutely. There's a huge lack of job training in federal prisons. Often people, we did a survey last year where we asked 2,000 federal prisoners about what kinds of jobs they had. And there were a few people who had sort of the good jobs. There's a factory job program in the federal prison system called Unicore, and that's like a real job. You learn a trade and you go for 40 hours a week, but those jobs are pretty limited. And a lot of people were saying, my job is I push a broom an hour a day, 5 days a week, and that's my job. And I'd like to do something other than that. I'd like to learn a real trade that I can come home and have and, take care of my family. And there's nothing here for me to learn how to do that. And that's a huge problem. That's a public safety problem. We need to be making that investment.
Sure, absolutely. How much does religion play into this? I know, obviously, with this meeting that there were a lot of pastors from the inner city areas that met with President Trump for this. And even here we have with our mentorship programs that a lot of it is faith-based. How much does religion play into criminal justice reform?
Well, the church and lots of people of faith of all denominations and all creeds actually have been supporters of prison reform historically. So a huge source of energy for this movement comes from people of faith, and particularly from large groups like Prison Fellowship that send thousands of volunteers into prisons every day to provide mentoring, counseling, training, education, and that's important. I think this is an area where you can have sort of public-private partnerships. The government doesn't necessarily have to do it all in this area. We can, call on volunteer communities, people of faith, church communities to come in and help.
Mm-hmm. That is very true. What's the next step with this bill? Who's supporting this bill? Who's maybe not supporting this bill? And where is it right now when it comes to the potential of actually having this go through?
Yeah, right now the bill is totally in flux, and that's largely because just in recent days, President Trump has said something that he hasn't said before, which is that he'd be also willing to include sentencing reforms in this prison reform bill. And right now, the prison reform bill doesn't touch our sentencing laws. We have a lot of very harsh and lengthy mandatory sentencing laws, a lot of which apply to nonviolent drug offenders and put people, not everybody, but some people in prison for far, far too long. And for years, people on both sides of the aisle have supported reforming some of those laws. So what's happening with the bill right now is a group of United States senators who've been working closely on these issues are meeting and trying to figure out what kind of sentencing reform can we put in this bill that everyone can agree on, that is meaningful, that is going to save some money, and that is going to be something that the president can sign.
Sure. We're talking with Molly Gill, VP of Policy for Families Against Mandatory Minimums. Talk about your organization, FAMM. What is FAMM and what do you guys do?
Sure. We're nonpartisan and nonprofit. We've been around for 27 years, and we advocate for criminal justice reform of all stripes. We work with state lawmakers. We work with Congress. We try to help people introduce and pass legislation that has good ideas in it for how to keep the public safe and how to make punishments fit the crime and the individual. And, back in the 1980s, all over this country, lots of legislatures and Congress created these mandatory minimum sentencing laws where if you, sell a certain amount of drugs, you get 5 years or 10 years in prison. And the judge doesn't get to look at things like, your criminal record or why you committed the crime or whether you have a drug abuse issue or a mental health issue going on in your life or even things like whether that's just too much prison time. Maybe the judge still thinks this person needs to go to prison, but I don't want to put them in there for 10 years. And these mandatory sentencing laws really tie judges' hands. They destroy local judge control over what they think is right for their community. And we just think they're un-American. And this is a #Freedom Loving Week, right? I mean, that's as anti-freedom as you can get. So we've been just working with really people in both parties and trying to educate people. We tell a lot of stories about this. You can find some of these stories on our website at FAMM.org. That's FAMM.org. Click on our stories tab. You can read stories about, just really kind of appalling stories. My favorite is Mandy Martinson, an Iowa woman who became addicted to drugs and had led a stellar life up until that point, and just had this small window of her life where everything just fell apart. And she started dating a drug dealer, and he had a far more extensive criminal record. He got busted, and they arrested her too. And she ended up getting a 15-year mandatory minimum prison sentence. It was her first and only offense in her entire life, and the judge didn't want to do it. And frankly, I mean, not saying she didn't deserve to be punished, and, she'll tell you, I broke the law, I committed a crime, I deserve to be punished, but 15 years was clearly over the top. And frankly, a waste of our taxpayer dollars. I mean, if we could, treat Mandy, get her back in the community working again much sooner than that, then what are we paying for all that extra incarceration for?
Well, and as you mentioned, I mean, prison reform is so huge, and it's a topic that a lot of politicians don't like to address or even talk about because it is a little uncomfortable for whatever reason. But when we're talking about taxpayer money going into the prison system and incarceration and the number of people being incarcerated, and we need to put the Band-Aid on it, not just a Band-Aid, but figure out why so many people are going towards either drugs or going towards crime in some way, shape, or form, and what we need to do to get these people back up and into society and actually functional in society without having to return back to prison over and over and over again, because that is a burden, a massive burden on the taxpayers in society. So it's a great discussion to be having. Again, I love what we're doing here in Kansas. Hopefully some of that gets in there as well. And I'm glad that we're actually addressing this on the national front. Molly Gill, VP of Policy for Families Against Mandatory Minimums. Molly, I really appreciate you coming on the show very much. We'd love to get you back on at a later time.
I'd love to be back. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it very much. Let's go ahead and take a break here. 22 minutes past the hour. We'll open up lines to you when we come back. Plus, after the bottom of the hour, Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell talking about the elections and the upcoming County Commission meeting, as we do on a hashtag Freedom Loving Wednesday. This is The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier on the Big Talker KQAM.
Toppers Plus Truck Accessories is celebrating our 20th anniversary, and this means big savings for you. Save $50 off any Rhino liner, save $100 off any Lear fiberglass topper, and save $50 off Lear folding and retractable tonneaus. That's right, $50 to $100 off this month only. Make your truck work for you this summer. Visit Toppers Plus Truck Accessories, 5511 West Central, or toppersplusks.com.
Make your truck work for you.
El Dorado Livestock Auction, 2.5 miles east of El Dorado on Highway 54. Pipe cattle pens with a capacity to hold 5,000 head of cattle. Covered pens to hold 3,500 to 4,000 head. There's a fully modern vet barn and a fully computerized sale program for fast and accurate settlement. The sales ring, comfortable stadium seating in a climate-controlled arena, and new scales. The sale order on sale day, stock cows and bulls, followed by calves, then feeder cattle, then butcher cows and bulls. The goal at El Dorado Livestock Auction is to get the highest possible price for the producer by bringing in the best possible buyers. The auction barn staff provides a friendly, personal relationship with each customer. The staff gets to know the customer and his or her individual needs, and then they meet those needs with an honest, full-value approach that serves both buyer and seller. El Dorado Livestock Auction, a sale every Thursday at 11 a.m. El Dorado Livestock Auction, 2.5 miles east of El Dorado on Highway 54.
Twenty-seven minutes past the hour. Welcome back into the Voice of Reason. Thanks again to Molly Gill with Families Against Mandatory Minimums talking about prison reform. I tell you what, we have a great... I want to get them back on, too, when we get a little bit more time and we kind of get out of election mode. But I want to get back on individuals from our state prisons, our state penitentiary units, because it is really interesting about the reform programs that we have here in the state, what we do with the incentive programs, what we do with the religious programs, with the incentive programs to get individuals out of incarceration and not return to them. We'll have to talk about that a little bit later for another time. But we do appreciate that very much. So if you've heard, of course, we do have our nominee now for the Republican governorship, and we are moving to the general election. We'll talk about that coming up in the 8 o'clock hour again. We'll run down the numbers. We'll run down what it looks like, and we'll talk about the issues that we need to address in our electoral process for the primaries here in Kansas. Let me tell you something. Here's my take on it. If you're an unaffiliated voter, sorry, the deadline was June 1st. You should have registered as a Republican or you should have registered as a Democrat. You're not going to vote in the primary process. To me, that's the way we need to handle this and address this. And we'll talk about that coming up in hour number 3. Plus, I don't know if you heard or not, but the individual up in, Lawrence, Kansas City, the teacher, the scientist that ended up having his visa expire is not facing deportation any longer. We'll be having a new hearing, but that's back in the news again from Lawrence Saeed Jamal. We'll talk about that in hour number 3 as well, as now he's not facing deportation. Why? And what's going on with that? We'll have the latest on that story. Lots to get to when we come back after the bottom of the hour. Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell chatting about the election, chatting about the county commission, and more right here on The Voice of Reason. It is a hashtag free-for-all. I guess you can have a free-for-all, but it is a freedom-loving Wednesday. We'll get your phone calls as well when we come back. This is The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
When a headline just isn't enough,
Is that all you got?
it's time to wake up the right way.
All right.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier on the Big Talker, 1480 AM and 1025 FM, KQAM.
Hey, welcome into it. It is The Voice of Reason. I am Andy Hoosier. It is a hashtag freedom-loving Wednesday. Welcome back into The Voice of Reason. 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. Big news today. Big day today. It's always a big day. It's always an exciting time here on The Voice of Reason. It's always a get you pumped up, ready to go kind of day. That's the way we roll. I wouldn't have it any other way. It is time as well with our county. We do this every single Wednesday, and we love having him on. Sedgwick County Commissioner Mr. Jim Howell back with us. Jim, how are you, my friend?
Well, I'm glad to be here, and this has been a tough week for a number of reasons, so I'm kind of glad to get some things out of the way.
Yeah, well, first off, I mean, I know you're part of it. Talk about the process of the canvassing that happened. I mean, you guys did the ballot count and all the shenanigans on Monday when you did the canvassing, counted all the provisional ballots, mail-in ballots. The process, did it go pretty smooth for Sedgwick County?
You know, there was a number of things that were a little bit different this time, and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around exactly why that is. We did change the envelope in the legislature last year because of an issue that happened a year ago. We had, I think, 21 ballots we did not count because we were counseled by our lawyers and by some people in the Secretary of State's office that we were not able to count those ballots. And after we made that decision last year, we got criticized. It was about people who are disabled and unable to sign their own envelope. So we went to the legislature and changed that. I think that may have had an impact on the fact that we did not actually have any signatures to debate on our canvass, which is very unusual. I've done, every year we are here, we have several elections we deal with, especially the 2016 primary and general elections. Those are fairly large elections, and so I've had kind of a lot of experience on this. We usually have a large stack of envelopes. We got to verify signatures, and they pull the signatures out of the file. Say, here's what the signature looked like, last year and 5 years ago, whatever. Because every time someone registers or does the driver's license or whatever, those signatures are archived, and so we can look at those signatures and we look at the envelope and say, these things just don't look like. This can't be the same person. There's just no way. So we debate that and we vote, and then generally some of those get through, some of those get rejected. We have 0 of those this time, which was very unusual. And there's a few other things we discovered. We actually discovered a couple things in the law that really ought to be challenged and possibly changed. And so this is a very productive opportunity to figure out how the elections are supposed to work. And when you find things that just don't work very well, we want to go fix them. So we've got some action items, and we're going to go to the legislature and try to fix those things. But really, the process was very smooth. We only had I think there was about 3 or 4 votes where there was actually a split vote, and usually it was me that voted against the majority. And I can explain those. They were very interesting cases. Again, I have my perspective, and I was outvoted by my colleagues, which is fine. Majority wins.
We'll talk about some of those processes, because I think this canvassing process now is really interesting since we usually don't pay attention to it. Usually the votes are called on Tuesday night, so when this canvassing takes place, we don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. We don't really care. But when it does come down to these elections that are, with the governor's race within 300 votes, within the Sedgwick County Commissioner's race that was within 80 votes, every vote counts. We saw the House race up in Hutch that won on Tuesday night by 1 vote, which means every vote up there counts when they did their canvassing. Now I think he's up to 5 votes. But when this stuff happens, what is the process and what are some of the technicalities, as we've talked about on the show, that may disqualify any provisional ballot to be not counted? And what were some of the discrepancies that you had?
Well, it's a great question. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of people on what's called the permanent disabled list. And we send out ballots automatically. They don't have to request one. They're just sent a ballot. A lot of these folks may be in nursing homes or whatever, but they're generally older people. For whatever reason, maybe they have passed away, but we didn't catch it in the obituary. We actually look at obituaries every day and update our voter rolls. But sometimes we don't catch them, and for whatever reason, we had about 300 or so that were undelivered, and that's unfortunate. Presumably, some of these people may have actually requested a mail ballot, and then when the mail ballot was mailed to them, for whatever reason, the post office couldn't locate that house or something, and they were returned undeliverable. Well, we don't have any way to really resolve that, so we have a ballot that came back to us. It's not been filled out. No one signed an envelope saying that they voted. I think the only option we have right then is to reject these mail ballots because they were undelivered by the post office. We had, I think, 6 or 7. Actually, we had 7, and one of them was out of the 7. There was one that was different, and I'll explain that in a second. We had 6 that were delivered after. And make sure I get this right. They were postmarked after the election date. So the people have to actually vote on August the 7th or before for that ballot to be counted. Well, they were dropped in the mail and postmarked on August the 8th. Well, that means they didn't vote on the 7th.
Yeah, that usually doesn't go very well with voting on. Now, Democrats usually go and vote on the 8th, but but for most people that actually understand it, Tuesday is the voting day. If you do that afterwards, it probably doesn't count.
That's correct. Yeah, we do have a new law that was passed last year that says if you drop it in the mail on Tuesday, and we receive it by Friday, and it's postmarked on Tuesday or before, then we have to accept that. Well, we did receive some of those, and those were accepted, but these 6 were postmarked after the 7th, so we had no choice but to reject them. The state law was very clear, and that was a 5-0 vote. There's very little debate. The state law actually addresses this, and so we as canvassers have to actually look at those ballots, verify that's the problem, and then we vote to reject those 6 ballots. Here's one of the things where I disagree with my colleagues. There was one ballot that did not have a postmark, and the reason that happened was because the voter, if I understand correctly, the voter actually went and turned it into the election office after 7 o'clock on voting day. Now, here's the funny thing: there is no mail pickup at 7 o'clock. They pick up mail after that. In some places here in Wichita, I think down at the airport, it's I believe 11:59 p.m. That's actually something I'd like to go verify. But nevertheless, they could have dropped it in the mail. As long as it's postmarked on the 7th, it actually is supposed to, by law, is supposed to count. Well, the person walked into the election office, and rather than put a stamp on it and mail it in, he handed it to an election worker, and they received it and actually signed the envelope. They could have said, we can't receive that, but if you put a stamp on it and drop it in the mailbox, it'll get through the system, and it'll be, that's what you surely should do here. But that's not what happened. Our staff actually received the envelope, and that voter went away thinking his vote was going to count. Well, I think that's unfortunate. I voted we should have received that because we know we had it in our hands on Tuesday, but because it did not comply with the strict interpretation, black and white interpretation of the law, it did not. In other words, it was not in our hands by 7 o'clock, and it did not get delivered by the post office before Friday, and it did not have a postmark of the 7th or before. Then, by strict interpretation of the law, that ballot should be rejected. And that's why my colleagues voted to reject that ballot. I think it's a little silly. I think the error was made by, in my opinion, would be a clerical error. We should have not received that ballot, but we did. And to the extent we know we had it in our hands on Tuesday, then we should have received that ballot. But this is the type of debates we have. And so that was I think that was a 1-4 vote. But nevertheless, there's several other ones that happen like that, where someone dropped the ballot off on Monday, a mail ballot, dropped it off on Monday, but there was no place to drop it off. At that particular moment, on that day, there was no place to drop off a ballot. He could have been told to put a stamp on it and drop it in the mail, and of course it would have been processed normally. But that's not what happened. An election worker received that ballot and signed the envelope And that's unfortunate because, or whatever. But the problem is that mail ballot was not mailed, and I'm a little confused by the details on that one. But
well, so
again,
what it kind of comes down
about it over there.
Yeah, what it kind of comes down to is that if you're going to take a mail ballot, then actually mail it and mail it before the actual deadline of the end of the day on Tuesday, or else don't actually go to the precinct and try and hand in a mail-in ballot and expect it to be counted, because that might be a technicality where it won't be counted. I find it a little silly that if you want a mail-in ballot, then I don't know why you would want to go to the voting booth on Tuesday, or if you want to go to the voting booth on Tuesday, why you request a mail-in ballot.
Well, the problem was this gentleman was leaving town. He wasn't going to be here on Tuesday. And so, and the polls were closed. I mean, he can hand it to any poll site that would be open, but there was nothing open. Technically, there was no polls open on Monday after noon hour.
Sure.
All the polls were shut down, preparing for Tuesday morning's beginning of the election day voting. And the election office does need that time to reconfigure everything they're doing across the entire county to transition from early voting to election day voting. They need that time, which is why that rule is there. They're not supposed to receive those ballots. But so when someone walks in and said, "I have no other option. Here's my ballot," and then they actually, reach out their hand and take it, that's a problem for me. And the gentleman could have been told to put a stamp on it and throw it in the mail, but he didn't do that. And so I don't know whose fault is that. Is it the voter's fault, or is it the election? Is it a staff person's fault, a clerical error, if you will? But the biggest debate, really, and I want to get to some of these other things about today's meeting in just a moment. But the other thing was really debated here was there was 14 ballots that we did accept. It was also a 4-1 vote, but I was in the majority this time. The problem is that for someone who comes into the poll site, and by the way, Johnson County and Sedgwick County currently deal with this differently. I don't know why that is, but in Johnson County, if you're unaffiliated and you walk in and you affiliate with a party, and again, since there's only two major parties that have primaries in Kansas, if you affiliate Republican or Democrat, then once you've done that, you can vote on that party's ballot. And that's the way it works, and that's how it works everywhere. But in Johnson County, they let you vote on a machine or a paper ballot, and it's counted right on the spot.
Sure.
In Sedgwick County, we make that a provisional ballot, and so we have people who filled out a registration card to transfer from unaffiliated to a partisan voter. In some cases, people wrote on there, "I do not want to affiliate," or they even checked the unaffiliated box, which, again, we have a stack of those, by the way, and because that person did not affiliate, and they made it very clear they did not want to affiliate, those ballots were by the canvassing board, those ballots were rejected. But for those that did, in fact, check the Republican or Democrat box, and they voted on the Republican or Democrat ballot, those votes were accepted. The problem was on these 14 registration cards, they failed to check one of those little bitty bubbles. And by the way, they're very, very small. They're almost impossible to see. And an astute election worker would have said, when the voter handed him that card, would have said, "Hey, you didn't quite complete the card. You have to finish it. There's one more thing you missed." Unfortunately, in these 14 cases, that card was received by an election worker, and that person was handed a ballot, and they voted. That ballot was put into a provisional envelope, and it was all paper clipped together. When we received it here, we have the registration card, we have the ballot, we have everything that's done, except for that bubble wasn't checked. And I call that a clerical error. And that's why we accepted those 14. But somebody would say, well, they didn't check that box. We don't know what their intention was. Well, I think we do know their intention. They asked for a partisan ballot, and they completed it in the envelope. And the only thing they didn't do was check that tiny little bitty bubble, and it's really hard to see it. And frankly, the election worker should not have received that card incomplete. They should have handed it back to the voter and said, "You missed a point." And again, if that voter would have checked Republican or Democrat, that vote would have counted. If they would have checked unaffiliated again, then that vote would not have counted because they have to affiliate. The problem is, whose fault is it? And in the case where we believe we can interpret voter intent, and there's arguably a clerical error, especially by our staff, then we have to err on the side of the voter and allow that person to be enfranchised rather than disenfranchised. And so that's why we had this debate. And I'm sorry that the people out there, I think, were thinking to themselves, this is what really bothers me. I don't care about how that impacts the Colyer-Kobach race or any other race for that matter. Right. We want to do our job correctly. And so there's people out there that are thinking in the back of their head that somehow these mail ballots, or the more ballots we accept, is going to help one candidate over the other. And they were trying to say, well, we're basically taking a position trying to defend the way that you can either accept or reject those ballots. And unfortunately, those arguments, in my opinion, are not the way we should handle this. We need to look at this and say, without respect to who it might benefit or hurt, but do the right thing. And I think we did that. And so without regard to whether these are Republican ballots or Democrat ballots or where these people might have lived around town or anything about that, we simply looked at the details of that and say, we believe this was a staff error. We received a card. It wasn't complete. The voter intent was clear. They received a partisan ballot, completed it in the envelope. And frankly, that tiny little bitty bubble was missed on the card. And we should not have accepted the card without that bubble being checked. And so with all due respect, 98% of the stuff was done right. And the error that was made was we received a card was incomplete. So that's the kind of thing we debate. And so roughly 1,200 ballots, we ended up accepting about 2/3 of those and rejected about 1/3. Most of the ones that were rejected were because people did not want to affiliate, or they were undelivered, or things like that. And there's a number of reasons that anybody would sit there and they would come to the same decision.
Sure. Well, and it is fascinating to watch, again, this canvassing process, and I'm glad that we have this canvassing process and that you guys have a chance to vote on it. And if there was a clerical error, to say, you know what, it was our end that we made a mistake with the people that were working it, not with the individual actually casting the ballot that intentionally wanted to, as you mentioned, like stay unaffiliated while trying to vote in an election. So it is really fun and interesting to watch. And according to the Wichita Eagle, the total number was you guys ended up accepting just over 1,300 ballots while rejecting just over 800. So as you mentioned, about 2/3 of them going through. So it was really nice to see that one. We got about a minute and a half left here. We didn't really talk a whole lot of county issues, but that is a really big one with the canvassing process. A lot of the Sedgwick County commissioners are involved in that process. One of the issues, and just talk about this really quickly for about 45 seconds, but the recount that may be happening with the 4th district for the Sedgwick County Commission, Richard Ranza and Hugh Nix. That one should be kind of interesting right now, about an 80 vote difference. What's that process going to look like?
Yeah, they're 75 votes apart. They will do a manual recount, which I absolutely love. This opportunity, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. We don't do recounts this broadly very often, and so this is going to be a great opportunity. But frankly, statistically, it's nearly impossible if this is going to flip. I mean, our processes are really good. I would not be surprised if we saw a 1 or 2 vote difference potentially, but a 75 would seem extremely unlikely. But that's fine. Any candidate that wants to pay for it can certainly have this done. I actually am kind of glad he did it because for me, it proves out that our system actually works. I'm looking forward to have that validation and that knowledge that our system actually did do it correctly. And by the way this is done, it's bipartisan teams. They sit down and they segregate the ballots, and they count them manually, and they recount them manually, and they recount them manually. Republicans, Democrats sitting side by side, and it's all done in the open so people can observe it.
Sure.
And so it's a very open and transparent process, and it's done over and over and over again until everyone agrees on the exact number, and there's no question what the vote totals were. So we can compare that with our current results, and I'm looking forward to finding those numbers.
Well, I am looking forward to that process, and we'll see what happens with that. Now, that one, of course, how long is that process going to take?
They have, by law, 5 business days, and they said it probably won't take that long. They're going to start that today.
Good.
So they have to be done no later than Sunday, I believe, but they'll be done before that, I'm pretty sure.
Well, good. And we have, a general election coming up soon, so I'm glad that's going to be within a 5-day realm. We'll keep an eye on that one. Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell, it's always a pleasure, my friend. I'm glad that you got to be part of that process. And if anybody does want to show up to the county commission meeting today, how can they do so?
We have our meeting this morning at 9 o'clock. We have a very busy schedule. We're going to pass nearly a $440 million budget this morning. There's a lot of changes in this, a lot of things to talk about, but people want to come up and engage that. We take public comment. We're on the 3rd floor of the Sedgwick County Courthouse. That's on the northwest corner of Central and Main, on the 3rd floor, and we would love to have them come up.
I love it. Jim, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. We'll chat again next Wednesday.
Thank you, Andy.
Always a good time. Let's take a break here. Get ready to wrap up hour number 2. We got a lot more to get to. We'll get back to the governor's race. We do have the audio from the press conference last night. Get your thoughts and calls and more. This is The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
You're listening to The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
We got a lot to get to. Thanks again to Sedgwick County Commissioner Mr. Jim Howell joining the program as he does every Wednesday. We'll continue that trend next week. When we come back, hour number 3, no guest. We chatted with our guests in the first part of this hour. No guest next hour. We'll chat about the race. We'll chat about Kris Kobach and Jeff Colyer. We'll chat about the elections that happened last night. We'll get your thoughts and calls uniting the Republican party, what this general election 2018 is going to look like. We'll have some fun with it coming up. This is your show. It's all about you, not about me. It's about you. It's time to speak up, speak out, speak loud, speak proud, speak the truth, and always speak some reason. Hour number 3, The Voice of Reason, coming up in just a minute. Stay here.
It's time for Reason.
Let's remember that Kansas hands out more provisional ballots than really any other state in the nation. And that's a good thing, because we want you to have the opportunity, if there's the slightest chance of your vote to be able to be counted. We're not sure at the time whether you can actually vote or not. Here's a provisional ballot. We'll look at it on the back end, and then we'll count it if we can. If not, then we'll have to toss it away. That's how our system is set up in Kansas.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Then I'll get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again.
That's what I'm talking about. Welcome into the Voice of Reason, hour number 3. The Voice of Reason broadcasting live out of the heart of the nation here in Wichita, Kansas. On the Big Talker, 1480 on the AM side, 102.5 on the FM side, KQAM, simulcasting on TV, KGPT TV, channel 2610. Good morning. Welcome aboard. It's great to have you along today on a hashtag freedom-loving Wednesday, baby. That's the way we roll, and this happened last night.
Tracy and I will not challenge this in court, nor will we be asking for a recount. Right here and now, we will endorse the winner, Kris Kobach and Wink Hartman.
That was Governor Jeff Colyer in his press conference last night, succeeding from the race, endorsing Kris Kobach and Wink Hartman for the governor's race 2018. It is a wonderful step that we have a nominee. Now, look, again, I would have supported either candidate going into the general election, but now that we have a candidate, we can focus on the main general election. And look, Governor Colyer, we thank you for what you've done for the state of Kansas, being a lieutenant governor with Governor Sam Brownback. One of the most, I don't think so, I'm still a big fan of him, but according to the media, one of the more divisive governors that we've had in the country. As governor yourself, I think you've done some really good things. I've disagreed on a few things, but I also disagreed with things that Governor Brownback did. I know I'll probably disagree with a few things that Governor Kris Kobach does. But just imagine us being able to retain the Republican governorship come 2019. That is the priority. Now, Governor Colyer, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you've done for the state of Kansas. We do appreciate it very, very much so. And thank you for last night, us being able to unite as a party to make this happen.
I've just had a conversation with the Secretary of State, and I congratulated him on his success. And I repeated my determination to keep this seat in Republican hands. This election is probably the closest in America, but the numbers are just not there unless we would go to extraordinary measures. But Kansas is too important. The people of Kansas are too important. Our children are too important.
It's very true. I mean, this is one of the closest races that we've seen in a really, really long time, maybe ever in the state for the governorship. One of the closest that we've seen as a governor's race in the country. And I called this one I want to say midday yesterday. Yesterday when the Sedgwick County numbers came out, Kris Kobach ended up taking a lead of almost 300, about 280, 290 votes, whatever it was. And I looked at it in between. If we looked at the ratio from the election results that came in on Tuesday night, if they stayed consistent with those provisional ballots from Johnson County, which was the only other one that we needed to wait on. We still have other counties that are waiting on, but they're small enough it's not going to make a difference. That even if Colyer ended up coming back and taking away some of that gain and that lead from Kris Kobach in Johnson County, it wouldn't have been enough, if it stayed consistent, it wouldn't have been enough for it to be too close for us to wait for the counties that were having 30 provisional ballots, 5 provisional ballots. So I ended up calling this, I want to say, about 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. And then, of course, Johnson County reported at about 5, and Kris Kobach took an even greater lead to the vote that at least we saw was about 345 votes between Kris Kobach and Jeff Colyer. And just imagine in a race where we had over 311,000 Republicans or unaffiliated or whoever vote in this race, and Democrats. I mean, it was the primary, but total turnout, 311,000 people, that it came down to within a 300 vote margin. You know what that says? That says that we're passionate. It says that we're excited. That says that we are energized. We are really passionate about who we want to represent us as the Republican Party, that we did understand that the primary is where we set the tone for the party, and then we go on from there as a unified party. That's what we have to do. Kris Kobach talked about unifying the party just days before when they held their press conference.
I want to say unequivocally that we will be a unified party as we move forward.
And that's what he said just days ago. Governor Colyer mentioned the same thing.
When I first became governor a few short months ago, I promised the citizens of Kansas that we would listen, we would serve, and we would lead. We will build solutions for Kansans. We're building solutions for our neighbors.
And that's what we do as a unified Republican Party. Now, the question is, will we stand unified as a Republican Party? Some that love Kris Kobach, some that despise Kris Kobach, some that loved Jeff Colyer, some that despised Jeff Colyer. Regardless of whatever your views of the individuals are now, we're a Republican Party. We're unified. And we have one of the best opportunities. I am more excited. Look, I know that the progressives are excited because they're saying, oh, look at that, the fringe corrupt Kris Kobach. He's the nominee for the governorship, and this is going to be a really easy race for us. I know Greg Orman, the independent, is sitting back thinking, oh, this is going to be great. We have the more, little bit more fringe conservative, which I don't like to say fringe, but he's a little bit more extreme conservative or outspoken conservative. And that's going to turn off some members of the Republican Party. I, as the independent, now going to have a better opportunity to be able to slip in here and have some more votes coming from the moderate Republicans. This is going to be great. Everybody's excited about this. Everybody. And with the traction that we have, with the momentum that we have right now, I don't see it. I know I'm the eternal optimist right now, and I am the Republican trying to get a Republican into office, but I don't see it from the objective standpoint here. What I see is a unified Republican Party that hopefully the members of the Republican Party, regardless of whether you like Kris Kobach or not, will unify under Kris Kobach for the governorship, while the Democrats are going to be torn. They're going to be split between a fringe Democratic candidate, Laura Kelly, who nobody knows who she is because she's a state senator, doesn't have a big track record, kind of a soft-spoken individual, not a whole lot of character. She's not going to appeal. Look, I've always told you that two things in politics that make you successful is money and PR. Laura Kelly does not have PR. She doesn't have the pizzazz. She doesn't have the cowbell. If you watch Saturday Night Live, it doesn't have enough cowbell. She doesn't have enough excitement and energy to rally a base of the Democratic Party. I believe in the poll that came out already from the Wichita Eagle saying that right now that Greg Orman could potentially get more votes than the Democrats because number one right now, we have more unaffiliated voters than we do in the state of Kansas than we do Democrats. And number two, the Democrats already know Greg Orman. He's run not as a Democrat, as an independent, but the Democrats have even kicked out candidates from their party to embrace Greg Orman in certain races in the past. Democrats know who Greg Orman is. He still is a left-wing progressive, maybe not as fringe as Laura Kelly, but he still is a left-wing progressive candidate as an independent. And he's going to play his cards smart, too. You know what he's going to campaign on? Two-party system's evil. Extreme Laura Kelly, extreme Kris Kobach, go to the center with Greg Orman. Now, when you ask him about policy and you ask him about platform, then it might be a different story, and he'll begin to show a little bit of his true colors of what he actually believes in. Even if he's not affiliated with the Democrats or the Republicans, doesn't mean that he doesn't have conservative or liberal tendencies. That's what we're going to have to get down to. But his campaign strategy is going to be, Republican, Democrat, two-party system's evil. Kris Kobach, Laura Kelly, they're evil. Go with the independent. That's going to be his strategy. It doesn't tell you anything other than just the two-party system's bad. But I guarantee you that Democrats are going to be torn between Greg Orman and Laura Kelly. If Republicans unite, if Republicans come together, and we understand party trumps person in the general election, Kris Kobach will be governor in 2019. That's the way it will be. If we're able to unite. The question is, will we? We've had some callers, we've had some listeners that were not fans of Kris Kobach. So I reach out to you and I ask you, will you support him in the race in the general election in November? 316-721-8255. You know what this is really coming down to? And what this really sounds like? This is The exact same parallel to what we saw in 2016 with President Donald Trump, or candidate Donald Trump then, and Hillary Clinton. Some that despised. Remember the conservatives? Remember the staunch conservative, the never Trumpers, the one that hated Donald Trump with a passion, that said he was not conservative. He's the most terrible candidate that we possibly could have had. I was one of those during the primary that said he's probably within the bottom 2 candidates that I would have actually supported. Then guess what? I came on board with him in the general election, because that's what you do, is you embrace and support the Republican candidates. Some said they wouldn't do it. They were going to vote third party. They were going to support the Republican candidate. They weren't going to vote. They would even prefer Hillary Clinton because it was going to be the same liberal tendencies, so we might as well do it with a Democrat name, right? That was the arguments in 2016 in the general election. This has come down to the exact same type of scenario. So where there are some in the Republican Party that do not like Kris Kobach, and I ask you, did you support Donald Trump in the election? Because this is a Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump mentality in Kansas for 2016. It's Kris Kobach or Laura Kelly. Greg Orman doesn't have a chance, and maybe he's got a little bit better chance than Laura Kelly because he is well known. But still, the duo of the Democrats or the progressives and the Republican. Which one's going to happen? I'd love to get your thoughts on this. 316-721-8255. 316-721-TALK. Lots to get to today with this race. Let's take some phone calls line. Number 1. Good morning. What's your name?
Hi, Andy. This is Helen.
Good morning, Helen. How are you?
Well, I'm doing just great, and I'm glad that Kris Kobach won. But, you were interviewing some gal that they're talking about prison reform.
Yes.
Well, if we really want to reform our prisons, we need to reform it according to God's holy laws and commandments. Like Jesus says in St. John 14:15, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Well, one of his commandments is, thine eye shall not pity him, the murderer, but thou shalt put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel or whatever nation you are, that it may go well with thee. Well, we don't execute murderers. We don't. God says to execute murderers, execute rapists. He dispatched them to Him so they can stand before Him in judgment. And it's just unbelievable. And so, and it says in Numbers 35:30 through 34, that we'll have the guilt of innocent blood on our nation. Our nation will remain polluted. And if we don't execute these people, just think how we could clean out our prisons and not have to keep building more prisons to hold more of these murderers and rapists and stuff, if we would just execute them.
Well, it's definitely a discussion to be had, and when it comes to prison reform, I mean, the harsh laws or the more relaxed laws, is something that we definitely need to have a conversation about. Helen, I appreciate it. I want to stay on the election right now, but I do want to talk about at some point the discussion of capital punishment, of the prison reform, and I do definitely want to get back to that because I think that we have opportunity to make things a lot better in society in those senses. But appreciate the call, Helen, very much so. And as you mentioned, very happy of Kris Kobach getting the nomination. When we come back, we'll take a break here. When we come back, we'll get your thoughts on the race. Will you embrace the Republicans? Will you embrace this? Also, the issue that arose in this election because it was so close when it regards to unaffiliated voters, how the votes are actually counted, how you can actually register as a party the day of, and should we be able to go through that process? We'll talk about that when we come back. This is The Voice of Reason on a Wednesday. Stay here.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier on the Big Talker, KQAM.
Democrats are so predictable, are they not? Progressives, you already know it. You already know the attacks. You already know their platform. You already know what they stand for. Laura Kelly yesterday, after the announcement from Kris Kobach on claiming victory, Jeff Colyer for dropping out and endorsing Kris Kobach. What did we say, yesterday, 2 days ago, a week ago? Regardless of whether it was Jeff Colyer or Kris Kobach with the nomination, that the Democrats and even Greg Orman, that their attack would be, their number one focus on attack would be, oh, look, it's the brown-back policies failed all over again. It's the continued failed brown-back policy. It would have been more so even with Jeff Colyer, because Jeff Colyer obviously being the lieutenant governor to Sam Brownback, but that's going to be the focus. Sam Brownback's name is going to be brought up more so than any other name really in this race, because it's going to be the failed Brownback policies, the failed Brownback. We called this. We knew it would happen. And the day after we get the nomination, they're already going to go on the assault, and it already started. Last night, about 13 hours ago on Twitter, Laura Kelly goes on a 4-tweet rant. Kansas families have already suffered enough under Sam Brownback's reckless policies. The last thing we need is a governor like Kris Kobach, who has pledged to bring back the same disastrous policies that created this mess. With Kris Kobach as governor, Kansans get all the failed policies of Brownback, plus Kobach's unique brand of hyper-partisanship and self-promotion. Quite simply, Kris Kobach is Sam Brownback on steroids, and that's the last thing Kansans need right now. Kansans have made it very clear they want to slam the door on the failed Brownback experiment that Kris Kobach represents. They want strong schools, good jobs, balanced budgets without new taxes, and a growing economy. Oh, it continues. These are the priorities I will bring to the governor's office after years of crisis and turmoil. Kansans want the steady and experienced leadership that I bring to the table. I'm ready to bring Kansans together to rebuild our state. We called it. We said this days ago that no matter what candidate it would be nothing more than just Sam Brownback. Sam Brownback. Brownback experiment, the failed Kansas experiment. Oh, look at this. It's really funny, though, that she comes out and says that they want strong schools. Well, yeah, that just means more money into the school system. No accountability, just more money, just bow down to the Supreme Court. Good jobs. As far as I'm aware, we have pretty good jobs. We actually have more jobs than we do workers in the state of Kansas. That's doing pretty well. Thanks, Sam Brownback and Jeff Colyer on that one. Balanced budget. Democrats haven't had a balanced budget in I don't know how many years. And right now, going into our 2-year budget cycle for the 2019 legislative session, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that we're already still in the red for the next 2 years, thanks to your educational funding. Without new taxes, which is hysterical, because look at what they just did, the largest tax increase in state history retroactively. But don't mind them. We're going to do it without any new taxes and growing economy. You don't grow the economy by government. I know it's a crazy foreign concept. You don't grow the economy by increasing government. Doesn't work that way. But going on the Brownback experiment, the Brownback failed policies, the conservative failed experiment, and Kris Kobach is the Sam Brownback on steroids. It's already begun. We knew it was going to happen. I find it laughable that they're that predictable. And that's going to be the entire message, the attack ads nonstop for the next 3 months. Get ready for it. But we're not going to listen to it because we're smarter than that, because unlike the Wizard of Oz, we actually have a brain.
Keeping Republicans and Democrats accountable. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Hey, welcome back into it. Wrapping up the program today on a hashtag Freedom-Loving Wednesday. We want to hear from you. It is open lines here for the last 30 minutes of the program. 316-721-8255. 316-721-TALK. So I was looking through the numbers from Johnson County when it comes to some of these votes, and not necessarily the provisional ballots, but just the outcome, the turnout, the registration, the number of registered voters. And here's something funny for you. When it comes to registered voters in Johnson County alone, there are 180,000 registered Republicans. There are 4,000 registered Libertarians. Well done, guys. There are 101,000 registered Democrats, so about 80,000 short. Again, this blue wave, Johnson County is supposed to be the moderate district, isn't it? It's supposed to be near Kansas City. It's supposed to be the place where it's very moderate Republicans and the Democrats have a really good say. There's 180,000 registered Republicans and 101,000 registered Democrats. Here's the kicker. Again, and this goes as a reflection to the rest of the state as well, there are 121,000 registered unaffiliated nonpartisan voters. There are 20,000 more nonpartisan, unaffiliated voters than there are Democrats in Johnson County. Now, whether it's because they don't want to be associated with the Republican Party because they're too extreme or too establishment or whatever, or because they don't want to associate with the Democrats because they're too extreme or too establishment or whatever, that they want to be the wicked, wild, free thinkers of voting as an unaffiliated voter. Now, and we need to address, I know it's over now, we're moving forward in the general election. We need to really look at what to address down the road for future elections on to stop all the shenanigans that happened in this race when it came to potential legal to litigation, when it came to the recounts, when it comes to the argument of unaffiliated voters. I know there are a lot of unaffiliated voters. If you are one of those unaffiliated voters, and I know obviously since there's so many of them in the state, I know that we probably have some listening right now, and we've talked to some already as well. But I think that we need to have the same deadline of June 1st, a month out before the primary race, that if you want to be part of the Republican or the Democratic primary elections, you need to be a registered Republican or Democrat. That's it. We talk about closed caucuses or closed primaries or open caucuses or open primaries or the different processes, the way to do it. And many states are very open to where any unaffiliated can come in and vote anytime they want to. They don't even have to worry about the issues that we had here in the state when it comes to having to register the day of or fill out the form to switching from unaffiliated to Republican or unaffiliated to Democrat. They don't even have to worry about that. Show up, boom, vote. There it is. You could even have Democrats walking in and voting Republican or Republicans walking in voting Democrat in the primary races. They could technically do that in many open primary states. Kansas is not one of those, but we're also not a closed primary. And that's what I think we need to be. We're not a closed primary process. We are a semi-closed primary process to where Democrats are not allowed to vote for Republicans in primaries. Republicans are not able to vote for Democrats in primaries, but unaffiliated voters, as long as they're registered voters, they don't have to be registered in a certain party, but as long as they're registered, they have the chance to show up the day of and vote. And that's what caused the issue in this race this year, because it came down so close. We had massive turnout. A lot of people are excited, and we had the close call with the Republicans, and it came down to unaffiliated voters. And different counties do it different ways. Now, the potential litigation that would have come out of this, and we were concerned about Jeff Colyer starting some litigation, taking it to court, trying to count some provisional ballots, trying to change some of the laws. The law in the state of Kansas states that if you show up, then what you do is you fill out the form that says, I want to change from an unaffiliated to a Republican or to a Democrat. You fill out that form, you check the ballot, and then they send you to the electronic machine or to a regular voting booth, and you cast a ballot, and you vote. And then because of the change, because of the proper documentation, and then the regular ballot, then you would have been voted just fine, and it would have been perfect. Some counties don't do that. We just heard from Jim Howell last hour. Some counties, like here, you fill out the form and then you fill out a provisional ballot. Now, many counties do not count a provisional ballot as a legit ballot if you change party affiliation the day before. And that was going to be the potential litigation that Jeff Colyer could have brought to the courts and said, hey, these people filled out the forms properly. They wanted to vote from an unaffiliated to Republican, and those provisional ballots did not get counted in some counties. I want that overturned, and I want them to be able to be counted. And guess what? This would have drug out for over a month, and it would have been a ridiculous case, and then we would have gone in a month and a half later into the general election campaigning-wise on who's actually going to be the candidate, and the Democrats and the Independent and everybody else would have had leaps and bounds ahead of anybody else in this race. And it would not have been good for Kansas, and it definitely wouldn't have been good for the Republican Party. And I'm glad we didn't go down that road. But we need to be aware of this issue before we actually go into another election. And my thought is, don't even worry about unaffiliated voters. I know there's a lot of them. I know you don't want to associate as a Republican or as a Democrat. But if you're going to partake in the party, look, this is, I related this to on Twitter a couple of days ago. I said, that's like an atheist going into a church and saying, you know what, I'm not part of the religion, I'm not part of your church, but I want to address your doctrine. I want to have a say in what your doctrine says as a church for the platform of what you believe in as a church, whether it's social issues, whether it's your stance on God, whether it's whatever. I want to have a say. I'm not part of it. I don't want to be associated with you, but I want to have a say in it. And that's the problem that I have here. Why would we allow someone that says, I don't want to be a part of the Republican Party. I don't like Republicans. I may be conservative, but I don't want to be part of the party. I don't want to be inside the party. I don't want to have anything to do with the party. I don't like the party. I am an independent, free-thinking voter, but I want to have a say in what candidate that you guys choose as a party. To me, that doesn't make any sense. And the same way with the Democrats. Why would we do that? The reason you're a member of the party is because you want to have a say in the party. The reason the party is there is to say we have like-minded ideals. We have a vision of what we want to see: lower taxes, limited government, less education, whatever. All the issues that we believe in as Republicans and as conservatives. We are like-minded individuals. We have created a party. That way we can have a unified membership of unified voices to represent us, and we're going to choose our party's leadership, our party's representation, the person who's going to have a platform in the party that's going to represent us, whether it's the statewide level, a county level, a federal level, whatever. We want to have that say. And for someone to come in from the outside and say, we have the like-minded individual, we have the same ideals, but I don't want to associate with you, but I want to have a say in your process. Or even someone who may not have it. You know what? I don't like Republicans at all. I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm not a registered Democrat, but I'm a liberal progressive. I don't like anything Republicans do. But you know what? I feel like going and voting as a Republican today just to try and vote for the lesser of two evils so the Republicans get a decently better candidate. Because I really, really hate somebody else, regardless of which one that may have been. Or you know what? I think this person has the best chance of losing in the election in the general, so I'm going to register as a Republican the last day of. I'm going to go in and I'm going to vote and I'm going to do that. There are so many. Come on, it's politics. Don't tell me that you don't think this stuff actually happens, do you? That's why we need a closed primary in the process. We need to start addressing this because this was a close race. This one meant something. And if we ever have an issue like this again, it's going to come up even worse than it did this time. Next time we could potentially go to litigation. Next time we could draw this primaries process out. And when we only have 3 months into the general election, that's valuable time. The Republicans or the Democrats at that time, whatever it may be, are going to lose bickering amongst one another as opposed to focusing on the general election. We need to address this. We need to be aware of it. And this needs to be an issue that we need to have right away as a discussion internally within the party on both sides of the aisle. Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe you don't like the fact that I'm closing off certain people. But if you're going to be a part of the club, then be part of the club. Don't try and be an outsider of the club and then have a say inside the club. Doesn't work that way. 316-721-8255. Let's go to the phones, get your thoughts on this. Line number one. Good morning. What's your name?
This is Jim.
Jim, hello, sir.
Hey, I was just looking on the Secretary of State's website, and they had an Excel file. I'll send you a link to it if you don't have it. But it's got a list of all the people registered as voters for the primary by political party. Statewide, there are 789,764 Republicans, and as you said, there's about 312,000 votes were cast in this election. So that's about a 40% turnout, which isn't bad for a primary, but we ought to be have a higher number.
It really isn't bad, but look at the rest of those numbers. So as you see on that, and I do have that spreadsheet, we talked about it yesterday, so 1.8 million registered voters total with all the different parties. There are 400 some odd thousand registered Democrats in the state, and then there are 50 some odd thousand unregistered, 588 unregistered voters in the state. So there are more unregistered than there are actual Democrats in the state.
Unaffiliated.
Or unaffiliated, exactly. Unaffiliated voters in the state of Kansas, more so than Democrats, and that's a large chunk of the number, which is why I think that many of the parties have kept it as a semi-open primary process, but maybe that'll get them off the fence and say, look, if you have Republican tendencies or Democrat tendencies, let's close off the primaries. Let's make sure you're registered within the party by June 1st, which is the deadline for this year. You have plenty of time to make sure your stuff's in order, your ID's in order, your registration's in order, and then when you go and vote in the primary, we don't have this problem about whether we should be counting or not counting unaffiliated voters.
Well, I remember a couple of years ago, I worked polls, and a person could come in and they could change their party from to a Democrat on election day.
Sure.
But you couldn't become a Republican if you were a Democrat, and you couldn't declare a party.
Sure.
If you were unaffiliated, you could declare either party. I'm not sure what those rules changed. And there was a web page on the Sedgwick County page about that with the layout, but I didn't pay that much attention since I've been registered in one party for 50 years, and it was only a side thing. But I agree, we need to have the party closed up so they can pick. I mean, I think in many cases, just like recently we had with the Ron Estes
right.
thing, that's one of those things where they're trying to get somebody in. Somebody paid those fees, and I could almost bet that Mr. Ron M. Estes did not get the check out of his own pocket. And,
well, you never know on that one. You're right. But, I mean, you're right. And no, we need to remember, Jim, I appreciate it very much. We have to remember the primary process, the elections on primary day are put on by the parties. It's not a statewide race where the state puts it on. It is the parties that put those on, because it is us as a member of the Republican Party. It is us as a member of the Democratic Party, where they say, this is the time we're going to vote as members of this club. It's an open club. You can say that it's free to join. You can join the club by just registering as a member of the party. But this is our chance to have our club's election for us to choose the nominees for our party to go into a general election. The general election is put on by the state, and the state's the one that organizes and does all that. The parties are the one that do the primary race. Now, obviously, with the help of the state and everything of that sort, but the parties are the ones that host these elections because they are having their club members actually choose who they're going to represent or have represent them. That's what the primary race is. And again, that brings up the question, why would someone who's not a member of that club, not a member of that party, all of a sudden get to turn around on the day of and say, yeah, I feel like doing this today. Yeah, I feel like actually registering as this party today, and then having a say, because I may not be affiliated. I may not like the party because I'm not affiliated with them, but I want to have a say in their private club meeting. That's, again, like an atheist walking into a church and saying, I don't like necessarily what you stand for, but I want to have a say in what your doctrine actually represents and what your platform actually will be as a church. Doesn't make any sense to me. We got to deal with that. 316-728. And some unaffiliated voters may be upset about that because they just don't want to associate with the party. Then you don't have a say in the Republican choices or the Democrat choices. Just whatever you get left over going into the general election, that's what you get. If you don't invest the time and invest the energy into the party, why would you not? Why would you have a say all of a sudden when it comes to the people that are representing those parties? To me, doesn't make any sense. But that's why, again, you didn't go and vote for an independent in the primary, because there is no party hosting those races. Greg Orman was not on the ballot for last week. The other one or two independent candidates are not on that ballot last week. It was just the Republicans or the Democrats. Party affiliation really does matter. You may not like the two-party system. It wasn't intended to be a two-party system, but the reality is we have a two-party system. They're the ones that put on the election. Let's be part of it, to be part of the voice, to be part of the decision-making, and actually have the best candidates that we can going into a general election. Got to take a break. Wrapping up the show today, 10 minutes before the top of the hour. We'll sneak in another caller, too, when we come back. This is The Voice of Reason.
The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
I've just had a conversation with the Secretary of State, and I congratulated him on his success, and I repeated my determination to keep this seat in Republican hands. This election is probably the closest in America, but the numbers are just not there unless we would go to extraordinary measures. But Kansas is too important. The people of Kansas are too important. Our children are too important.
I want to say unequivocally that we will be a unified party as we move forward.
We are a unified party. This is going to be, we said it here first, you heard it here first. This is the Donald Trump Hillary Clinton race for the state of Kansas. This is the Kris Kobach, Laura Kelly race. This is the Donald Trump Hillary Clinton race right here in the state of Kansas. It's funny how things kind of happen that way, isn't it? The far left progressive, the conservative, the getter-dunner, the not afraid to call out somebody that's attacking. See, this is why the media panics about Kris Kobach so much. And Jeff Colyer, I mean, they obviously wouldn't have liked him because he's a conservative too. He's a quote-unquote brown backer, right? Yeah, he's a brown backer. They don't like that fact, but they really despise Kris Kobach, not only for the voter ID stuff or the immigration thing. They can try and pawn him off as a racist all they want to. It's a little absurd. It's not going to work. The reason that they despise Kris Kobach so much is because, unlike Brownback, Kris Kobach attacks when he gets attacked, just like Donald Trump. Sam Brownback, I love Sam Brownback to death. I love Jeff Colyer as well, but both of them, they're too nice. Politics is a dirty business. Politics gets mean sometimes, and they wanted to be liked by so many people. That was the one fault that Sam Brownback had, I think. Well, he had a couple, but one of the main faults he had was that he was too nice. He didn't stand up and say, no, that's enough. You're not going to act like that. You're not going to do this, and we're not going to go down that far towards, the Supreme Court or whatever. He tried to be nice and tried to play it cool and tried to find the happy medium to try and appease everybody. And if you've ever learned anything in life, when you try to appease someone too much or appease everybody, then no one likes you. And that's what happened with Sam Brownback. Was that he was just a divisive character because he tried to be too nice, and then he offended people when he was trying to hurt them or trying to help them, and then others that were his base, they got upset at him because he was trying to go the other way to try and appease the other individuals, and it just didn't work. Kris Kobach's not going to do that. If the media takes a shot at him, he's going to take a shot back at him, just like Donald Trump. This is the Donald Trump-Hillary Clinton race for the state of Kansas. Let's get ready for it. 2018 is going to be a heck of a run, isn't it? It's going to be a ride, baby. It's going to be a roller coaster, and we're going to have some fun because that's what we do right here on The Voice of Reason. This is your show, as always. It's time to speak up, speak out, speak loud, speak proud, speak the truth, and always speak some reason. This is The Voice of Reason. Everybody enjoy your Wednesday. We'll be back on a Thursday right here on The Voice of Reason.